Welcome to the Valley Today, a public service presentation of KAIL TV. It's time once again for our visit with the Clovis Botanical Garden, featuring their Waterwise plant sale and event on Saturday, September 28th from 8 a.m. to 12 noon. Join us as we visit with Ruth and Thelma at the Clovis Botanical Garden. It's next on the Valley Today. Welcome to the Valley Today. We are at the Clovis Botanical Garden with Ruth Salutis here, and we're talking about one of your new things is cactus.
Cactus and succulents.
Yeah.
You know that every cactus is a succulent, but not all succulents are cactus.
No, wait a minute now. My head's going to explode now.
So when you talk about succulents, you are talking about the category cactus also.
Yeah.
But when you're talking about cactus, you're not talking about succulents.
Okay,
You're talking about a particular type of succulent.
Yeah, and this is one of the new things that you're bringing to the garden.
Yes, we
I mean,
are.
you have some cactus here, right? Or these are cactus here, right?
Well, these are
or
succulents.
Cacti, or these are succulents.
And some cacti.
Yeah. And so this is another journey into water-wise gardening.
Oh, it really is. You know, a lot of people have sort of not thought about using cactus and succulents in their gardens before, but they've become a lot more popular in recent years actually, and they're totally appropriate for our Central Valley climate.
Yeah.
The only thing I have to say though is that it's difficult to plant them just out in the open sun. You know, you need to provide some kind of shade for them, you know, partial shade during the day, and they'll do a lot better. That way they don't get burnt. We try to put out plants that don't require lots of care in the winter, because there are some plants also that don't tolerate the cold, but you can see how these have tolerated very well the cold. We don't ever cover them. So we've got different kinds of agaves here, and we've got some dacylarians these dacylarians right here are just incredible with the heat and the cold.
We don't really have the brutal cold though, like they do where they get snow.
We do have a freeze though.
Yeah, that's true. It does get below freezing.
And we do have some that do well in freezing temperature as well. They just may disappear and then come back again when the temperature begins to, springtime and things.
We had a short water year this year, and the more important for people to adopt these new practices of being stingy with their water.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
and
especially with water meters in Fresno now, and that's a whole nother subject.
Oh, I know, and then the cost is doubling.
Yeah.
And many people have even come and visited the garden and asked us questions about their watering and asked us questions about plants, because they're also concerned now. You know, their grass is a problem for them because it requires so much water. And so a lot of people are pulling it out.
Yeah, and perhaps this is going to be the evolution of a new type of gardening in California, where we don't see lawns so much anymore, but we see these, water-wise gardens where there's not as much maintenance required, where you're not mowing the lawn every week and you're not edging and doing all this other stuff.
That's right, Bob. You know, we don't need to do that anymore. And I do hope to see that kind of evolution, but I think it won't be as quick as we'd like it to be. But more and more people are starting to notice and think, I can do something different with my garden. It doesn't mean that you're not going to have flowers. It doesn't mean that you're not going to have a particular pattern.
Right.
There's a lot of different kinds of plants. People coming to the garden sale, the fall garden plant sale, on the 28th of September, we'll have an opportunity to look at some different kinds of plants that they can use in their garden, and hopefully they'll get inspired. We also want to inspire people when they come to the garden to look at different ways of looking at their landscape, and also different plants to look at, so they can get some ideas of what they might like.
Yeah. And this is all changing now. I mean, this is for the plant sale. This is a great way for people to come up with a new plan for their yard.
It is, and it's the mission of the garden, to do that, to help people plan and look at their gardens and look at new plants and come and see a garden that has a variety of plants, so they can see what sort of things they might be inspired to plant.
Now, the succulents and the cactus that you have here, are all these local native species?
Oh no, they're not. They're some of them are native species, but they'll be native to Arizona or native to northern Mexico, or they may come from South America or other Mediterranean climates, even Africa.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, are there any cactus that are local in the valley?
Well, let's see. There are some Dudleas that are local, and I'm sure there's a lot more, but I'm not really certain of which ones would fall into that category that are here that we could exhibit.
And are these stupid proof? I mean, where you can get them established
Well,
and, you know, and then maybe
yes.
just ignore them for a while?
Oh yeah, these are totally ignorable.
Yeah.
Because they just grow.
Yeah.
And you can watch them grow and have the joy of watching them grow because they're so, so beautiful. Some
Right.
of these agaves are just stunning, and I know you'll, you know, people will have a chance to look at them and
Yeah.
perhaps get some inspiration.
Some of these Joshua trees, and you have Joshua trees that you're going to be planting, and you're establishing a new garden over here, right?
Yes, we are.
So are you going to take all the cactus that you've established and you're going to move them?
It's going to be a big job, but we'll be moving these plants right here behind us. We'll be moving those, and we'll be moving several others. We also have a very large donation of very beautiful cactus that we're going to be moving into the garden. So we'll have an actual succulent cactus garden with some tree plantings mixed in between those plantings.
And you know, it's funny, now that I think back, I went to the Cactus Society had a showing in Sierra Vista Mall, I think.
Yes.
Last year or the year before, and we actually did a show on that. We went and talked to a couple of people, and you know, they have these little potted cactus of different varieties, and it was very interesting and very colorful.
Oh yeah, it's a wonderful organization. I'm also a member of that organization, and you know, if people have an interest in succulents and cactus, I suggest that they go to the website.
Yeah, I think that's for you. I should have turned it off.
I'm sorry. I thought it was me for a moment. Okay.
Right.
Right.
And Joshua trees, you have a Joshua tree here, so when will that reach full maturity?
Oh, it'll take years for it to reach full maturity, but you know, in the process of that maturation, the plant is really a beautiful thing to see. You know, look at the saguaro cacti, which are real famous, of course, in Arizona and northern Mexico because they're so tall.
Right.
They take 100 years plus to reach maturity. But at the same time, just to watch them grow is really interesting to do.
Right.
So it takes a while. Mainly it'll be a nice design that people can look and say, oh, wow, I never thought about using my cactus or my succulents that way. And it'll give people a good idea of what types of cactus and succulent will grow here in the valley.
Will most of them grow here in the valley?
Certain ones, and certain other ones won't. You know, you go to the coast and of course you see just the most gorgeous plants. You go to Sunset Magazine and you see these incredible succulents in these gardens that are just to die for.
Right.
But here in Fresno, you can't expect that to happen. You can expect some of that to happen if you happen to have a microclimate in your yard, which some people do and they're not aware of. And they can grow a lot of succulents in those microclimates, and they do really well. And you don't even have to worry about covering them very much.
And most of these, I think you mentioned earlier, are they need a little shade, but primarily full sun. But if they can get a little shade, maybe in the middle of the day.
Well, yeah, you know, like the saguaro, you'll never have to give it, you know, shade. It just goes and goes. These Dacilarians behind us, you never have to give them any shade. They'll just grow no matter what. They also make a beautiful plant when they're integrated with grasses. So if people, you know, might not think, well, gee, you know, integrating grasses with a succulent, well, of course, it works beautifully. It's
and of
quite
course,
nice.
all these low water use, and the very, very low maintenance too. So the whole deal is going to change if you go to a low water use garden.
Oh yes, and you know, you have to be able to use your imagination because you'll have to use plants in more imaginative ways, but boy, do they make beautiful gardens.
Yeah, and of course this is a whole new thing for people if you know, they've kind of hate their gardening habits now. You know, this could be a whole new thing for them.
Well, sure, it's got less maintenance with it.
Once
so
they
it
get
should be a lot
established and
easier.
all that, then you know, they don't have to commit a half a day every week to doing maintenance and you know, mowing and all things like
and
that.
we even have samples of grass here, the buffalo grass, where you'd only have to mow it maybe 3 or 4 times a year if you wanted to. Otherwise, it'll grow about, you know, 6-8 inches at the most.
Right.
And it looks really beautiful because it converts your garden into something called a meadow garden. So there's this kind of soft, fluffy look to the grass. And of course, your pets would probably just love it.
Oh, yeah. So you're having your plant sale, and it's informational also.
Oh, yeah.
On September 28th, Saturday, what, do you open at 9?
Yes,
open at 8.
We're opening at 8 today, this time, and we're closing at 12 noon.
Yeah.
So before we used to run till 2 p.m. So now we're, you know, it's shorter period of time. Well, it's really the same amount of time, but it's starting earlier because of the heat. We want to get people, you know, to look at the plants, do their buying early while it's not too hot,
Yeah.
and come and enjoy some seminars or some contact with landscape designers. We're charging $25 for a visit with a landscape designer, but it's so
Does
worth
the
it,
landscape
consulting.
designer come to your home and look at your yard?
Well, they might if in the future, if you make a connection with them and you like what they have to say to you
Yeah.
and what they have to offer and the suggestions that they're making, and you think it's a nice fit for yourself, definitely it's doable.
And one question I've asked, a lot of people, including my wife and I, we have a gardener that comes in every week, and he does he does deadheading, and they mow the lawn and edge and all that, and blow the walks.
Yes.
To get into a low-use water garden, have you ever weighed the expense benefits?
Well, imagine right now what your bill is for the maintenance of your garden. So if you're taking out your grass, you probably just need him to come in and maybe blow and clean up for you. And if you like to have him come in and deadhead, that'd be fine. But I would imagine the cost would be at least half or maybe more. Or maybe you could eliminate it completely, because I do know people who have eliminated it.
Yeah, they've just completely taken out all their traditional landscape around their house and put in a low-use water setup.
Yes, and they've integrated it with some nice other kinds of plants. They've put in nice pergolas, or they've put in beautiful little low fences that complement it. They take and use gravels, different types of gravels, different kinds of stones, and it just looks really beautiful.
Yeah.
It's remarkably beautiful.
So again, you're having the plant sale on Saturday, September 28th, 8 to noon, here at the Clovis Botanical Garden at the corner of Clovis and Alluvial Avenue. I'm talking about native species,
California native.
California natives.
That's right, California.
I'm a California native.
You are?
Yeah.
Good.
Born and raised.
Good.
Yeah, I bet
So,
you are too, huh?
I'm not.
You're not?
I'm originally from the Midwest, sort of the Midwest, Colorado.
Okay.
But California natives are not just because a plant was born and raised here. The technical definition, if you will, of a native plant is one that was here prior to European colonization.
Okay.
So that's
because
why
the European colonization brought a lot of plants with them.
Right.
Yeah.
And came from the east as well. As people started to move
Right.
to the west, then they brought lots of plants that they knew from the east.
Yeah.
Which is really why we end up with lawns today, because the turf grasses we see.
Now don't move too far away.
The turf grasses we see in our front lawns are not native at all.
Right.
There are some better turf grasses that are not necessarily native, but there's a buffalo grass installation at the front of the garden, and that is a much better alternative. It is native to the Midwest. It's native to Colorado and New Mexico.
So 200 years ago, here in the Central Valley, what were some of the native species?
Down here, it was mostly grassland.
Okay.
So native grasses were probably dominant in this area, as well as the springtime.
And this was a pretty marshy area, right?
Yeah, there were certainly plenty more water
Yeah.
because Tule Lake was the largest lake west of the Mississippi.
Right.
So in our specific area, like right here where the botanical garden is, probably was grasses, probably native grasses that were just grazed by various ruminants, elk or antelope. I think there was some native antelope. Now that we live here, there are many, many species that are native to the foothills that work well here. This desert willow is actually not native to this part of California. It's native to desert washes closer to in the Riverside County area.
Okay.
But it does great in the valley.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful tree. So
But you wouldn't have seen this 200 years ago coming in as a settler.
No, you would not have. You would, if we all really wanted to revert back to the true natives, we would have just have grassland.
Right.
And that's not merely practical for human, we want a little bit of shade.
Sure.
Everyone did.
Yeah.
It's just that the natives, peoples who lived here moved up to the foothills when it got hot.
Yeah.
They didn't stay down here. So we plant trees, things like desert willow is one of the nice ones. There are a number of foothill trees, like California Bay, that grow very nicely down here. There are some ash. There's an ash called a Fresno ash, even though the word ash in Spanish means Fresno.
Fresno,
I mean,
right.
Fresno is the word ash.
It is ash, yeah.
But there are plenty of trees, small and large. Of course, there's native oaks. If you wanted to plant an oak in your yard, And then there's lots and lots of shrubs. There are shrubs that kind of are foothill, lower foothill shrubs. There are plenty of examples of that here in the garden.
Now, manzanita is a local species,
Yeah,
right?
manzanita is almost exclusively, not exclusively California, but certainly Mediterranean.
Right.
And I can't remember the number. There's something like a couple of hundred species of manzanita.
And of course, all these are low-use plants, low-water-use plants.
Most of them are,
Yeah.
yes. If they come...
I mean, the ones in this garden.
The ones in this garden
Yeah.
definitely are.
Right.
Yeah, and there are some, sometimes people have an area in their yard that is a little wet or a little more shade. And so we have microclimates that are worth understanding. What kind of an area would that have come from? Maybe it's not as chaparral-like, or it's, depending on the soil, you may need to have something that is tolerant of clay or tolerant of no
sand.
water, or
Yeah.
tolerant of sand.
Right.
There's a beautiful blooming plant called Ramnia, and it has a blossom about this big, looks like a big fried egg.
Yeah.
And it tolerates sandy soil, which is great. Loves sandy soil, but hates clay.
Yeah.
So we have examples here in the garden, and during the plant sale, we split with the botanical garden. We have one area where we only sell natives, and the Native Plant Society sells those. And we educate people as much as we can, understanding what plants work well in their yard.
Are there a lot of people that want to get exclusively local native plants in their yards now?
Probably not as, it's hard until you become more knowledgeable and comfortable with their look. I think everyone loves to see the foothills.
Yeah.
They don't translate always to that could be my front yard, and it's attractive.
Right.
Because it is a different look. Just like in the garden, you don't
Yeah.
see lawn, you see mulch, you see plant leaves dropping down. And I think as people are becoming more conscious of water and the use of water, you start to become aware of the cycle of life, what
Right.
it takes to really have plants be healthy, and that, leaves on the ground are okay. They don't
Yeah.
have to be all over your
Well,
lawn.
certainly when I was a kid, leaves were verboten. Nobody wanted leaves after they fell. But now you get leaves into the garden, and it's good mulch. It is weed abatement,
Right.
to some degree.
It recycles
and
those nutrients.
It recycles its nutrients, and it also harbors water longer.
Yes, yeah. And it's also very good, actually, there's insects. I've been watching lizards running around the garden, and
Yeah.
it's one of the best things to have.
I call them the bennies.
The bennies,
beneficials.
yeah,
the
that's
bennies.
right.
That's what I call
And
them.
they'll go around and pick, little insects out of mulch, and they need little shady
Yeah.
places. So rocks in the garden, plenty of things that you can do to make a little bit of a microclimate of your own garden.
Right.
And you don't have to go all native. Those of us that have reached, some of us, who shall remain unnamed, but it could be me, have gone to the other side.
So is it you or not? I mean, that's the burning question there.
But, there are some people who really do realize, I like these more and more and more, and
Right.
other people like a little bit of them.
Yeah.
When you mix with different parts of the Mediterranean world, you have to be aware of how much water.
Right.
It's really the biggest issue, I think,
Yeah.
is when you're putting two plants together. Do they have similar water characteristics and soil characteristics? And then you can mix from different parts of the world, and you don't have to be exclusively natives. And then eventually you might be.
So this is a great opportunity for people to come September 28th, Saturday, from
Saturday.
8 to noon.
8 to noon.
And to transform their traditional gardens now and lawns and all that, and come and see what this is all about.
Yes.
And maybe come up with a new game plan to have a low water use yard, the whole thing.
The whole thing. Or sometimes, people with children want to have a little bit of a lawn.
Sure.
They just don't need the entire backyard filled.
Yeah.
And actually, children, and if anyone comes to the garden and brings their children find this garden very exciting. It's far more interesting because they're walking along the path and a lizard scoots along.
Yeah.
Or they can get under the shade of something, or they can put a little bench under something. This is, from my perspective, I would far rather have a garden like this for children than a big flat expanse of lawn. If they need to go play kickball, they can go out to the park.
Yeah.
But having this be a much more interesting place for kids to hide under, to climb a tree and sit that's low, So I think a little lawn is very nice. Put your chair out there. You can still have that and still have water
Yeah.
wise.
So if you were to take a traditional yard and transfer it into this, how much time would it take to get some of these shade trees up and
giving you shade.
and giving you shade?
Well, a desert willow like this, probably within 5 years, is pretty good size. It's not as large as these. These are probably 12, maybe 12 years old, and these are wonderful. But within 5 years, you can have a pretty nice tree. And shrubs will also some shrubs will grow very quickly. So within 5 years, it's often difficult because when you first plant, especially natives, and I think low water use, so much of their effort is spent for the first few years getting rooted, getting established. Right. So they don't grow a lot on the top, and people tend to plant them close together. And then they realize after 5 years, they've got to take one out because they seemed so small when we planted them. And once they establish, then you see growth within a few years. It's very.
But it really does take a while for the root ball to get oriented.
Right.
Yeah.
I think of it like children. I think it's a very good parallel with children. You don't send your child out at age 7 to go to work.
Right.
It takes a while to teach them.
At least not in this country.
Not in this country. That's true. In this country, you don't send some, 3. Let's say 3.
Now, don't get too far away. Don't
Okay.
get too far away.
So you root them. That's really the idea.
Yeah.
Is you want a plant that's going to be here for a long time, and if you go on vacation and forget to water, that it doesn't die before you get back. It may look peaked. It may not be as nice as when you left, but that if it doesn't get watered for a month, it's not going to die. It can still revive.
And I think this year we've seen the typical cycles, not a lot of rainfall this year, and the temperatures have been up there too. There was a couple of days where it was approaching 120 degrees, so it was pretty hot.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And if you've let your plants get well established and you've mulched them well, they won't look good up above. And sometimes overwatering, they're adapted to dry and drought. They have ancestrally these plants have been through those cycles. So they have it in their DNA to deal with it. It doesn't mean they're going to look all that great, but nobody does if you have to sit outside in 115-degree heat.
Right.
So if you take care of them and you get them well established, then they will tolerate it. And when we do have better weather, they'll be better. And you can prune them back and make them, shape them and look nice.
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing is really a change of mindset, that we don't
right,
have the
yeah,
water.
it's perception.
It's perception.
Yeah.
Completely perception.
Yeah. And people want their water, and I can't blame them, but we have to get smart about how we're using available clean water.
Right.
As far as, we need to drink it, we need to bathe, we need to do other things. Now, that reminds me, is there any gray water that you can bring back out? I mean, not necessarily toilet water, but, gray water, dishwater and stuff like that you could bring out to the garden and start putting it on your plants rather than send it down the drain?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I looked this up, and I don't have it at the tip of my fingertips, but I believe there is no problem with gray water in Fresno County. Fresno City, I'm not positive about. But it's not that hard to use gray water.
Yeah, well, I wasn't really worried about the legal ramifications. I was worried about the plant's health.
No, the plants will be fine as long as you don't use bleach, for example, in your
something that's caustic.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But if you're careful with
But if it's a little soapy water, maybe that'll be okay.
That'll be fine. Yeah. I grew up using gray water because we had no running water.
Really?
And so
where was this?
This was in southeastern Colorado.
Oh, really?
And so we had to take all water we used and put it somewhere.
And repurpose it.
So we watered our plants.
Yeah. I can't imagine how much water we put down the drain as a society. I know that I'm even guilty of it.
Sure,
so, if we look at that and expand that out exponentially, it's just got to be this incredible amount of water.
The other thing sometimes what people can do, and I know that Ruth was saying they're going to do that in the cactus garden, is kind of a dry wash, which water will percolate down into your area. So if you can store water, even if this tree, this tree's roots, typically roots are going to go out about as far as the canopy.
Yeah.
So this tree's roots are way out here.
We're out of time, Thelma, but once again, let's mention you have a plant sale.
And we'll have people at the plant sale who can talk
Experts on
intelligently
plants,
about native
experts on
plants.
landscaping, experts on water, experts on soil